In July 2017 Krabby Town, the town was shocked by the story of a massacre that just occurred. Surifith, driven by a personal vendetta over a land dispute, led a gang to the home of village chief, Sunglung. Disguised in military uniforms, the gang held 11 family members captive, torturing them for hours. They then executed 8 people, including the chief, his wife, children, and other relatives. 3 others were critically injured, but survived. The police quickly arrested Surifith and his accomplices. The case known as the Krabby Family Massacre highlighted the severe consequences of personal and land disputes in Thailand. It led to increased scrutiny of local security measures and the legal system to prevent such tragedies in the future. In Thailand, the Thai criminal code states that any person who kills another person shall be punished by death or up to 20 years of imprisonment. In 2014, 2 bodies were discovered in a forest near Brasov, a city in Transylvania. The victims, a young couple, had been brutally murdered. The case remains unsolved, with various theories circulating, including the possibility of a ritualistic killing or involvement in illegal activities. The forest setting and the nature of the crime added an element of mystery and fear to the local community. Transylvania, with its mix of ancient lore and modern life, continues to be a place where history and contemporary issues intersect, sometimes with tragic outcomes. These cases, both old and new, remind us that the region's dark reputation is not solely a product of myth and legend. Transylvania has a long history of brutal murders, war. It's a dark part of Europe. Transylvania was home to Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. As I explored Transylvania, I couldn't stop but think about all the brutal murders that have happened over the years. Brutal murders that are now forgotten. People that have been forgotten. Stories we will never know. One of the most shocking and tragic crimes in Cannes occurred in December 2014 when 8 children were found in a home in the suburb of Manura. The children, aged between 2 and 14, were discovered by the police after a woman, Mersane Waria, who was the mother of 7 of the children, and an aunt to the 8th, was found with stab wounds. She was later charged with their murders. The case sent shockwaves through the community and garnered national and international media attention due to its horrific nature. In 1991, Kevin Crump, who brutally murdered his ex-girlfriend and her new partner with a pair of scissors. Crump had a history of domestic violence and had been stalking his ex-girlfriend before committing the murders. The crime shocked the local community and led to significant charges of how domestic violence cases are handled in Australia. Australia is a country that has a history of violence just like any other country. But almost every single act of violence in this country has been documented. Australia is a relatively new country, and it has a history of violence, similar to the United States. But in modern times, Australia is way safer than the United States of America. Bakersfield, California has had a higher crime rate compared to national averages in the past, particularly for property crimes and certain violent crimes. However, like many cities, crime rates can vary by neighborhood, and over time, due to various factors such as socioeconomic conditions. As a world traveler, I've been to dozens of countries across most continents on the planet. The city where I felt the most insecure is in Bakersfield. There's more people that get murdered in Bakersfield every year in this city alone than entire other countries of the Western world. More people are murdered in Bakersfield than Iceland every year, Luxembourg, etc. Bakersfield is literally one of the worst cities I have ever been to. There's nothing but apprehension, anxiety in the air. And if there's no anxiety, tension, or fear in the air that you can sense, you will definitely breathe in the air, which is extremely polluted. For many years in a row, the air of Bakersfield was one of the most polluted, responsible for many deaths. Bakersfield is a city where not only are many of the citizens prone to violence statistically, since they're more likely to commit acts of violence in the city than other cities, Bakersfield is a city where some sources say that there's a much higher chance of you being assaulted, and it's much more dangerous, the city, than 90% of other countries and towns of the United States. This city is extremely dangerous, and there's many stories to tell. But I will not be able to cover all of the stories in this documentary, because I would need about 20 hours or more, perhaps even 50 or 100 hours, to talk about all the cases of murder, rape, and violent assaults that have happened in Bakersfield. Unlike Transylvania, most of the murder and violent assaults have been recorded by law enforcement in Bakersfield. Patricia Altora, a 14-year-old girl who disappeared in July 1998, is a story that has never left me. The first time I heard it, I was heartbroken. She was last seen walking home from summer school but never made it. Her disappearance sparked an extensive search effort involving law enforcement and the community. Sadly, Patricia's body was found several weeks later in a remote area near Edison Highway. Despite years of investigation, including interviews with witnesses and persons of interest, the case remains unsolved. Patricia's family and the community continue to seek answers and justice for her untimely death. As of 2024, she should have been around age 40 by now if she were to have lived. I think about what could have been of her life. She could have graduated high school, gone to university, gotten married, after starting maybe a career as a doctor or a nurse or an engineer. She could have kids by now, and those kids could have been in high school, or they could have already graduated high school and going off to university. It's depressing and sad that Bakersfield lost this child that had her whole life ahead of her. But she's just one of the many unsolved murders of Bakersfield. If you were to see the list and pictures of the faces of all of the people who have been murdered, you would be floored, shocked that such a city like Bakersfield exists. In 2014, Ruben Castro choked 34-year-old Andrea Russell at the Super 8 motel in Weibel Road. He told police detectives he choked Russell in self-defense after she came at him with a knife. They were meeting over money owed for methamphetamine, according to investigative reports from the time. Russell's body was found days later in an abandoned house in an area of South Union Avenue and Highway 99. In 2014, Sylvester Soto, 49, a tow truck driver, was killed by 3 shotgun blasts while picking up a vehicle in an intersection of Newmarket Road and Edison Highway, several miles east of Bakersfield. Juan Francisco Lopez killed Soto for money, according to authorities. Lopez was convicted both for special circumstances, including murder for financial gain. A Kern County mother and father were found guilty of abusing their 6-week-old baby, nearly killing him. The Kern County DA's office said on October 19, 2023, a Kern County jury found George Milan guilty of attempted murder,
torture, child abuse under circumstances likely to produce great bodily injury, or death and child abuse. Elizabeth Jarr was also found guilty of assault likely to cause a great bodily injury, child abuse under circumstances likely to produce great bodily injury or death, and child abuse. The victim was Milan and Jarr's 6-week-old son. The DA's office said from March 20, 2021 to May 3, 2021, Milan and Jarr kept the baby in a room where they lived in Wasco. According to the DA's office, the home in which they lived was in squalid condition, having dog feces and cockroaches throughout.
Paweł Adamowicz was a mayor of Poland, Gdańsk. He was assassinated in 2019. It was a beautiful day on the January of 13th. He was stabbed in the heart and through the diaphragm with a knife on a stage at the Great Orchestra Christmas charity event. He was taken to the University Clinical Center at Gdańsk in critical condition, where he underwent 5 hours of surgery. He succumbed to his injuries the following day. The assassin was apprehended at the scene of the crime. A police spokesman said that the detained man was a 27-year-old Stefan Wilmot who lived in the city. The spokesman also stated that the man had a long criminal history, including 4 bank robberies. After stabbing the mayor, he seized the microphone and claimed false imprisonment and torture at the hands of the previous centrist civic platform PO government. The murder was captured on video by many of the attendees that were at the event. On January 14th, thousands attended vigils across Poland to pay their respects to the mayor. His widow, who was in London at the time of the assassination, was flown back to Poland by the Polish government. The president of Poland at the time described the attack as a hard-to-imagine evil and stated that the day of his funeral will be observed as a national day of mourning. The mayor's coffin was decorated with white flowers and draped with the flag of Gdańsk. Before being driven in a hearse from the European Solidarity Center in the city, past schools, monuments, and other places significant to the dead mayor's life, it was watched by thousands of people on screen. When the hearse reached the Church of St. Mary, the city's main basilica, the coffin was brought into the church after a mass. The mayor was cremated. On January 19th, the main funeral service was held at St. Mary's Church, Gdańsk. Notable people who attended including the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, the President of Poland, the Prime Minister of Poland, former President of Poland, Communist oppositionist and Nobel Peace Prize winner Lech Walesa, former Polish presidents, and the former German president. Thousands more Poles watched the service on screens. At the end of the service, the mayor's ashes were laid to rest in one of the chapels of St. Mary's Church in Gdańsk. Pawlo Tuszlin is a serial killer that was executed in Gdańsk, Poland. Most of the world has never even heard of this Polish serial killer. Usually people know of Ted Bundy, Jack the Ripper, and Jeffrey Dahmer and BTK and killers like that fat clown, that homosexual clown that killed dozens of boys. But most people have never heard of serial killers of Europe. Paweł joined the military, but he ended his military service after a few months when it turned out that he had impaired hearing. He fled to Gdańsk, got a job as a driver, and got married. During this period, he was sentenced for minor thefts. He served those sentences from the 20th December of 1976 to June 28th, 1979. Sometime later, he divorced his wife and remarried a woman named Regina. His neighbors described him as a calm, stable, resourceful man who cared for his wife and 2 children, yet he was very introverted. At the time, he was having problems with his libido, as well as exhibitionism. He killed many women. So far, 9 have been confirmed. All of them were murdered in Northern Europe, including in the city of Gdansk. The police became aware of a possible serial killer as early as November 1979. On the November of 18th, 1979, Tuchlin attacked an 18-year-old Irina H. While doing so, he lost a murder weapon, a hammer, in the Radunia River next to the place of the assault. The word ZNTK, or railway, rolling stockworks, had been engraved in the metal. The militia received a list of all the people using the tools, but Tuchlin was not listed. They interrogated everyone who has been recorded to have picked up the hammer, but they all had credible alibis. The store owner may have missed Tuchlin, failing to record his name. It is also possible that Tuchlin simply stole the hammer in the 2 weeks he worked at the company. The hammer was carefully wrapped up in a bandage, according to Tuchlin. The hammer caught him cold in the stomach while he wore it in his pants looking for victims. On January 6, 1983, a special group was formed under the name Scorpion, consisting of 11 people at the provincial headquarters. Tuchlin was arrested on May 31, 1983 at the age of 37 on suspicion of theft of wood and parlor. During the search of his farm, among other things, the car registration number GDM1418 was found in the trunk of the vehicle along with the hammer on whose handle was the blood of the victims. Tuchlin spent 6 months on psychiatric observation. During the course of the investigation, Tuchlin admitted to 11 attempted murders and 10 murders. As he claimed during the interrogation, he murdered to feel better. At the hearing, however, he recanted his testimony, claiming that he was forced to confess by the police. The regional court of Gdansk sentenced Tuchlin to death for 9 murders and 11 attempted murders on August 6, 1985. The Supreme Court upheld the sentence, and the State Council decided not to grant leniency. The sentence was carried out, and Tuchlin was hanged at the detention center at 12 Kurkuva Street on May 25, 1987. After his death, he was decapitated and immersed in a formalin jar, which later went missing. He was buried in the cemetery in Gdansk at one of the NN headquarters, according to Marek Maj, a defender of Tuchlin during the investigation. Gravediggers urinated in the coffin before the lid was closed. Some people like myself would say that he got off easy. He didn't suffer too much. His death was too quick. It should be law that one should be able to, as a government, legally torture a serial killer or somebody that hurts children or women. But we live in a society, most of us do at least, where one cannot simply torture people as a punishment. One could only arrest them, confine them to live in a cage, which is known as a prison cell, or simply sentence them to death if the law allows it. The world is full of cruel and dangerous and extremely evil people. Sometimes I feel like perhaps there is no God. How can a loving God allow innocent women and children to die at the hands of people like this serial killer? If there is a God, I hope he has, or it has, an explanation, a very good one, to explain why he allows this brutal thing called existence and acts that happen within the people that it or he has created. Why does he allow murder, rape, torture, bad things happen to good people? There are many concentration camps across Europe, but one concentration camp that almost nobody talks about is the Studov concentration camp, 21 miles near Gdansk, Poland. Perhaps the reason why a lot of people don't seem to talk about this concentration camp is because not as many Jewish people and not as many people of other ethnic backgrounds died here. There were more people that were murdered in Auschwitz than Studov. Studov still has seen tens of thousands of murders. Stutthof was a Nazi concentration camp established by Nazi Germany in a secluded marshy and wooded area near the village of Stutthof, 21 miles east of the city of Danzig, now known as Gdansk, in the territory of the German annexed Free City of Danzig. The camp was set up around existing structures after the invasion of Poland in World War II, and initially used for the imprisonment of Polish leaders and the intelligentsia. The actual barracks were built the following year by prisoners. Most of the infrastructure of the concentration camp was either destroyed or dismantled shortly after the war. In 1962, the former concentration camp, with its remaining structures, was turned into a memorial museum. Stutthof was the first German concentration camp set up outside German borders in World War II, in operation from the 2nd of September 1939. It was also the last camp liberated by the Allies. On the 9th of May of 1945 was when it was liberated. It is estimated that between 63,000 and 65,000 prisoners of Stutthof concentration camp and its subcamps died as a result of murder, starvation, epidemics, extreme labor conditions, brutal and forced evacuations, and a lack of medical attention. Some 28,000 of those who died were Jews. In total, as many as 110,000 people were deported to the camp in the course of its existence. About 24,600 were transferred from Stutthof to other locations. The camp was established in connection with the ethnic cleansing project that included the liquidation of Polish elites, members of the intelligentsia, religious and political leaders in the Danzig area and Western Prussia. Even before the war began, the German Selbstschutz in Pomerania created lists of people to be arrested, and the Nazi authorities were secretly reviewing suitable places to set up concentration camps in their area. Originally, Stutthof was a civilian internment camp under the Danzig police chief before its subsequent massive expansion. In November 1941, it became a labor education camp like Dachau, administered by the German security police. Finally, in January 1942, Stutthof became a regular concentration camp. The original camp was known as the Old Camp, surrounded by barbed wire, a fence made with barbed wire. It comprised 8 barracks for the inmates and a Kommandantur for the SS guards, totaling 120,000 square meters, or 1,300,000 square feet. In 1943, the camp was enlarged and a new camp was constructed alongside the earlier one. It was also surrounded by electrified barbed wire fence and contained 30 new barracks, raising the total area to 1.2 square kilometers. A crematorium and a gas chamber were added in 1943, just in time to start mass executions when Stutthof was included in the final solution in June 1944. Mobile gas wagons were also used to complement the maximum capacity of the gas chamber, 150 people per execution when needed. The camp staff consisted of German SS guards, and after 1943, the Ukrainian auxiliaries brought in the SS Gruppenführer Fritz Katzmann, the higher SS and police leader of the area. In 1942, the first German female SS Offenscharinnen guards arrived at the Stutthof along with female prisoners. A total of 295 women guards worked as staff in the Stutthof complex of camps. Among the notable female guards personnel were Elizabeth Becker, Erna Baldhard, Ella Bergmann, Ella Blank, Gerda Bork, Herta Both, Erna Botcher, Hermine Botcher Bruckner, Steffi Breilwaxi, Charlotte Graf, Charlotte Greger, Charlotte Klein, Greta Steinhoff, Eva Baraldis, and Jenny Wanda Barkman. 34 female guards, including Becker, Both, Steifen, Paradis, and Barkman, were identified later as having committed crimes against humanity. The SS in Stutthof began conscripting women from Danzig and the surrounding cities in June 1944 to train as camp guards because of their severe shortage after the women's subcamp of Stutthof, called the Bromberg OST, was set up in the city of Bydgoszcz. Several Norwegian Waffen SS volunteers worked as guards or as instructors for prisoners from Nordic countries. according to senior researcher at the Norwegian Center for Studies of Holocaust and Religious Minorities, Terje Emberland. The first 150 inmates imprisoned on the 2nd of September 1939 were selected among Poles and Jews arrested in Danzig immediately after the outbreak of the war. The inmate population rose to 6,000 in the following 2 weeks. On 15 September 1939, until 1942, nearly all of the prisoners were Polish. The number of inmates increased considerably in 1944, with Jews forming a significant proportion of the newcomers. The first contingent of 2,500 Jewish prisoners arrived from Auschwitz in July 1944. In total, 23,566 Jews, including 21,817 women, were transferred to Stade from Auschwitz, and 25,053, including 16,123 women, from camps in the Baltic states. When the Soviet Army began its advance through German-occupied Estonia in July and August 1944, the camp staff of Kluga concentration camp evacuated the majority of the inmates by sea and sent them to Stadov. Other sources say that the camp staff shot most remaining inmates in mass murder. Stadov's registered inmates, including citizens of 28 countries, and besides Jews and Poles, Germans, Czechs, Dutch, Belgians, French, Norwegians, Finns, Danes, Lithuanians, Latvians, Belarusians, Russians, and others. Among 110,000 prisoners were Jews from all over Europe, members of the Polish underground, Polish civilians deported from Warsaw during the Warsaw Uprising, Lithuanian and Latvian intelligentsia, Latvian resistance fighters, psychiatric patients, Soviet prisoners of war, and communists. And as an example of communist deportations to Stadov, see the Danish Horserud camp. One prominent inmate and survivor of the Stadov concentration camp was a member of the parliament for the Communist Party of Denmark, Martin Nielsen, who detailed his deportation to experience in and ensuing death march from the camp in his book Rapport fra Stadov, Report from Stadov. It is believed the inmates sent the immediate execution were not registered. Conditions in the camp were extremely harsh. Tens of thousands of prisoners succumbed to starvation and disease. Many died in typhus epidemics that swept the camp in the winter of 1942 and again in 1944. Those whom the SS guards judged too weak or sick to work were gassed in the camp's small gas chamber. The first executions were carried out on 11 January and 22 March 1940. 89 Polish activists and government officials were shot. Gassing with Zyklon B began in June 1944. 4,000 prisoners, including Jewish women and children, were killed in a gas chamber before the evacuation of the camp. Another method of execution practiced in Stadov was lethal injection of phenol. Prisoners were also drowned in mud or clubbed to death. Between 63,000 and 65,000 people died in the camp. A range of German organizations and individuals used set-off prisoners as forced laborers. Many prisoners worked in SS-owned businesses, such as DA, literally German Equipment Works, the heavily guarded armaments factory located inside the camp next to prisoner barracks. Other inmates labored in local brickyards, in private industrial enterprises, in agriculture, or in the camp's own workshops. In 1944, as forced labor by concentration camp prisoners became increasingly important in armaments production.
Roger Andermatt, known as the Death Keeper of Lucerne, is a Swiss serial killer with 22 claimed victims between 1995 and 2001. He is the most prolific serial killer in Swiss criminal history. Andermatt worked as a nurse in various retirement homes in central Switzerland, including the retirement home of Ischoff in Lucerne. All his victims were in need of care. The murders were noticed by an accumulation of deaths in certain homes. The victims in question's bodies were exhumed and autopsied in 2001. Andermatt was also known as the dance teacher and a DJ by the name of ROG. Andermatt was convicted on January 28, 2005 by the Lucerne Criminal Court for murder in 22 cases, attempted murder in 3 cases, and unfinished murder in 2 cases with resignation and life imprisonment. Thus, the court's punishment was above the prosecutor's request, and in particular did not follow the line of defense, killing out of sympathy. On February 15, 2006, the sentence was upheld at a second hearing. The Lucerne High Court convicted Andermatt, but only in 7 murder cases. The remaining 15 cases were classified as deliberate killings. There are also 3 completed and 2 unfinished killing attempts. Owing to the high number of victims, the court decided to sentence Andermatt to life imprisonment. Andermatt confessed to the murders but claims to have acted out of compassion. He also complained that he and the nursing team had been overwhelmed. Roger Andermatt looks like a typical serial killer, a man with glasses. He would be classified as an angel of death in the United States, since he's a medical care professional, at least was, that would murder his victims. Ian Black, a journalist, wrote an article on the Angel of Death. The male nurse, dubbed Switzerland's Angel of Death, has apparently confessed to killing a total of 27 patients. Roger Andermatt admitted killing a further 18 elderly patients. It emerged yesterday after saying this summer that he had killed 9. Investigators said a nursing home employee had admitted putting his mostly women victims out of their misery by administering drug overdoses or smothering them with plastic bags and towels. The 32-year-old was arrested in June after a suspicious death in a nursing home, and subsequently admitted killing 9 patients. Sometimes he drugged them and blocked their noses and mouths until they stopped breathing. The investigating magistrate, Orvo Niemann, told a press conference in Lucerne. Mr. Niemann said Mr. Andermatt claimed to have acted out of sympathy, compassion, empathy, and salvation of the people involved. On the other hand, he also acknowledged that in several cases, he had been overwhelmed by caring for the people involved. In some cases, he felt relieved, somehow liberated after the person had died. The original 9 killings came to light in May in a special unit for the senile in an elderly people's home in Lucerne, central Switzerland, where the nurse works since December 2000. The suspect, whom the authorities describe as well-educated, was arrested on June 28th and remains in custody. Investigations were extended to other homes and hospitals where Mr. Andermatt had worked. 5 bodies have been exhumed. Police traced 12 mercy killings to one home in the central Swiss canton of Waldbaden. It has been suspected and confirmed that he murdered in many cities and towns.
A gunman who shot 3 worshippers in a Zurich mosque on Monday evening was a 24-year-old Swiss man with Ghanaian roots and no apparent links to Islamist radicalism, police said on Tuesday. The suspect, whom they do not identify by name, is thought to have killed another man in Zurich on Sunday. He seems to have taken his own life shortly after the mosque shooting, whose motivation remains a mystery. Police officials said, "He is a Swiss, and we don't know anything about the motives." The head of the criminal investigations for the Zurich Cantonal Police told a news conference the gunman from the nearby town of Uster had stormed into the Islamic center near the main train station in Switzerland's financial capital and opened fire on people praying, wounding 3 men whose condition was said to be improving on Tuesday. His body was found soon afterwards around 300 meters away. He appears to have shot himself, police said. Investigators were puzzled over what set off the deadly chain of events. The man whose last run with the law was as a bike thief 7 years ago had quit his job in a shop on Friday. There were indications that the man had taken an interest in occult sciences. Lintes Mili said, adding it was not clear at this stage whether he was mentally ill. 2 days later, he is suspected of killing a man with South American roots. He seems to have been acquainted with and leaving the body in a playground in Zurich. The mayhem continued when he entered the mosque after dusk on Monday, armed with a gun for which he had a permit. We are still waiting to see if that person was targeting us or if it was a coincidence that brought him to us. Everything is open, Saad Subhan from the Zurich Islamic Community Foundation told reporters after the media conference. The victims are aged 30, 35, and 56. 2 of them were seriously injured in the attack, a rare case of gun violence in Switzerland, while a third sustained less severe injuries. All Muslims are of course shocked that people praying came under fire. Andre Goon, spokesman for the Federation of Islamic Organizations in Switzerland, said before the shooter's background became known. This would be equally shocking if done by Muslim, Christians, Hindus, or any other religious groups. He said, adding, "We all have to stand together for peace. This cannot be allowed to escalate." Switzerland, where 2/3 of the 8.3 million population identify as Christians, has been wrestling with the role of Islam as its Muslim population has risen to 5%. In 2009, a nationwide vote backed a constitutional ban on new minarets. A woman jogger was killed by a naked man who was screaming and attacking people in a lakeside park in Switzerland, police said Wednesday. The attack happened Tuesday evening in Manderdorf on Lake Zurich, around 12 miles southeast of Switzerland's biggest city. The Zurich Cantonal Police said a 19-year-old suspect was arrested. On Tuesday evening, a woman was attacked and fatally injured by a man, Manderdorf, police said, adding that the woman had been out jogging. Shortly before 8 p.m., 1 p.m. Eastern, passersby reported a man in Alma Park who was running around naked, screaming and physically attacking other people. The emergency services who quickly arrived on site found a seriously injured woman lying on the ground, the police said, adding that despite immediate resuscitation, the woman died from her serious injuries. The suspect, a Swiss national, was also found at the park and was arrested, the police said. The victim's identity was not provided due to an ongoing investigation, they said, which included inquiries to determine whether the suspect and the victim had known each other. After questioning, the suspect will be referred to the public prosecutor for serious violent crime, the police said. There were no immediate reports about other people attacked by the suspect sustaining serious injuries. The Zurich massacre was an anti-Semitic episode in Zurich, Switzerland, which occurred in 1349. The incident was caused by anti-Semitism in the city due to the alleged murder of the son of a Zurich man, and fueled by the subsequent accusations of well poisoning. This event took place in the frame of the widespread Black Death persecutions, where the Jews were accused of spreading the bubonic plague, known as the Black Death. The son of Zurich man Zuru Weiden, from a family of shoemakers about 4 years old, was murdered, and the Jews were accused of the murder. He was buried by his murderers in the Wolfbach, known as Wolfbrook to English speakers. A boy named Walther von Weil, shredding the water on stills, found the dead body some time later. The Jews supposedly killed him with nails as he was hammered to death. They had taken his blood and then had buried him in the stream. The accused Jews were brought to court. Those declared guilty were burned to death, while their supposed accomplices were banished from Zurich. Because of lack of contemporary chronicles reporting the story of the murder of the child, which is first mentioned in written sources roughly 200 years after the event, some modern historians doubt its veracity. Shortly after the Zurich Weiden's case was over, the Zurich Jews were accused of well poisoning. As a result, the city council ordered the Jews to be burned to death. They were executed on a religious holiday. Vincent Edward Brothers is an American mass murderer convicted of killing his wife, 3 children, and his mother-in-law. Brothers previously was the former vice principal of John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California, and holds a master's degree in education from Cal State Bakersfield and a bachelor's degree from Norfolk State University. Brothers, who had months earlier married his wife for the second time, was convicted of killing her, their new baby, 2 toddlers, and his mother-in-law on July 6, 2003. He attempted to create an alibi by flying to Columbus, Ohio under the pretext of visiting his brother. He drove his rental car to Bakersfield, murdered his family members, and returned to Ohio. Forensic analysis of the rental car showed insects native to states west of the Rocky Mountains, and an odometer readings that supported the round trip to California. Brothers was convicted of first-degree murders with special circumstances of multiple murder, and was ultimately sentenced to death. Joanne, her mother, and the children were last seen at church on July 6, 2003, and their bodies were discovered shot to death on Tuesday, July 8, in what appeared to be a staged break-in. Brothers had turned himself in to authorities in North Carolina where he was visiting his mother, but was released after a few hours due to lack of evidence at that time. Brothers returned to Los Angeles on July 11, 2003. He did not attend the memorial service for his wife, children, and mother-in-law, but attended their funeral on Wednesday, July 16th. Although considered the only suspect from the beginning, he was not arrested until April 2004. He was later placed into the custody of the California Department of Corrections and placed on death row at San Quentin State Prison. As of the 1st of July of 2024, Vincent Brothers is still on death row. Someone I personally know went to a hospital in Bakersfield, specifically Kern Medical Center in East Bakersfield. While this person was waiting in the ER room, he said that all of a sudden a man walked into the ER room that was covered in blood, to which this person that I know eventually found out was because the man was stabbed multiple times. The stabbed man told my friend, "Help, man, can you get someone? I've been stabbed." And the person that I know quickly found someone to help this man. Stabbings are sometimes too frequent among some demographics in Bakersfield, it seems, such as gangsters. But it's not just stabbings, it's shootings between gang members. Gang shootings are too common in Bakersfield. A very large part of the shootings that occur in Bakersfield are between gangs. There was a couple of years in Bakersfield where there were so many shootings that Bakersfield and Kern County was one of the most murderous counties in the United States and the most murderous county in California. On the 2nd of July of 2024, a man suspected of participating in 2 killings was arraigned Tuesday on more than a dozen felony counts, including 2 counts of murder. Patrell Seals, 22, was ordered held without bail after a deputy public defender entered not guilty pleas on his behalf. Seals is eligible for the death penalty. He was arrested last week. Seals and co-defendant Noah Malishi Hernandez, who was arrested months ago, are believed responsible for multiple shootings in the Bakersfield area. Sheriff's investigators said in court filings Hernandez faces 3 counts of murder. The 2 are due in court Monday for a status conference. Among the killings of which they're accused is the November 21, 2021 shooting of Jose de la Torre in the parking lot of the Taco Bell at 551 Weed Patch Highway. Another shooting linked to them occurred on December 17, 2021 in the area of East California Avenue and Ogden Street, according to the filings. James Ernest Ellis, 20, was pronounced dead after being taken to Kern Medical. A man convicted of murdering a woman in 1990 was denied parole recently. The man was once granted parole in 2018 but was again arrested within 4 months of being released. On June 27, 2024, BPH found that William Thunderrush continued to pose a current and unreasonable risk to public safety. The DA's office said on January 8, 1990, law enforcement were called to report of a dead body in the alley near the 2100 block of F Street in Bakersfield. When they arrived, they found the body of 25-year-old Cindy Cake Hawks wrapped inside a blanket. According to the DA's office, the victim suffered from extensive blunt force trauma to the face and head, and her jaw was broken in multiple places. The autopsy found that the victim suffered massive blunt force trauma to the head that caused the blood from the brain to fill her lungs. According to the DA's office, Rush and the victim attended a party near the area where her body was found. The DA's office said Rush tried to have sexual intercourse with the victim, but she refused him. After Rush beat her to death, Rush admitted that after he finished beating her, he could hear her struggling to breathe and blood was coming out of her mouth. Rush tried to dispose of the victim's body in a nearby dumpster, according to the DA's office. However, when he could not lift her into the dumpster, he left her body lying in the alley. On October 18, 1990, Rush pled guilty to murder in the second degree. On November 14, 1990, a Kern County judge sentenced him to 15 years to life. On April 26, 2018, Rush was released from prison after a grant of parole. Within weeks of being on parole, Rush began violating the terms and conditions of parole. On 6 of August of 2018, Rush absconded from parole. Ultimately, Rush was arrested. The Kern County District Office prosecuted Rush for violation of parole, and he was returned to prison in December 2018. On June 27, 2024, the BPH conducted Rush's 4th parole reconsideration hearing. At the hearing, the commissioners focused on the events that led up to his parole violation and the work he has done in prison to address his risk factors. The Kern County District Attorney's Office asked the Board of Parole to deny parole. The BPH ultimately denied parole. A parole reconsideration hearing is held annually until an inmate receives a new grant of parole. As such, Rush's next hearing will be in 1 year. District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer commented saying, Rush had previously been granted a second opportunity to demonstrate compliance with the law, which he failed to do. Consequently, for the safety of society, it is crucial that he remain in prison. A man charged with murder in a Bakersfield homicide that occurred 6 years ago was arrested Monday in Georgia, police said. Christopher Nathaniel Kenny is awaiting extradition to Kern County, police said. Kenny is charged with murder and 4 counts of attempted murder in a shooting that occurred in 2018, killing rival gang member Jeremy Charles Littlejohn and wounding 4 others, according to court documents. Charges were brought earlier this year. Kenny's DNA was found on shell casings at the scene, documents said. The victims were hit outside an open garage on Chandler Court south of Wilson Avenue and the west of Weibel Road. It's alleged Kenny participated in a reenactment of the shooting in a rap video titled Funk Season, posted on YouTube. The video starts with a skit which depicts Kenny sneaking up to a subject in an apartment complex before shooting and killing him, a Bakersfield police investigator wrote in the documents. The depicted victim in the music video bears resemblance to, the name is redacted, but apparently Littlejohn by way of race and overall build and body type. Bakersfield police said on May 20, 2024 at around 11:31 p.m. officers were called to a ShotSpotter activation in the 100 block of Union Avenue. When officers arrived, they found a man suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Police said over a week later, on May 28, 2024, at around 5 p.m., detectives found and detained 25-year-old Dalton Thompson, 23-year-old William Jordan, and 22-year-old Joey Elias in the 100 block of I Street. According to Bakersfield police from the investigation, all 3 were arrested for charges associated with murder and robbery. 3 people, including a 17-month-old baby, have died after deputies were called to a reported shooting at a home in South Bakersfield Monday night. KCSO said deputies were called to the 1900 block of South M Street on October 16, 2023, at around 6:15 p.m. to respond to a report of a shooting inside a home. When they arrived, they found 3 people, a man, woman, and child, inside the residence who appear to be victims of a violent assault. KCSO said the man was found with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Detectives responded and assumed the investigation. 3 people killed have been identified by the Kern County Coroner's Office as 30-year-old Luis Carlos Jimenez, 36-year-old April Trujillo Salinas, and a 17-month-old baby girl, all of Bakersfield. The coroner's report said all were shot and died at the scene. On November 25, 1999, Walden Taylor Jr. was walking with 2 friends in the 4000 block of O Street. He was approached by a male subject and shot multiple times. Martha Duncan, Ricky Duncan, and George Clinton. On November 4, 1999, at about 6 p.m., the Bakersfield Fire Department was dispatched to the Metropole Hotel located at 627 Sumner Street regarding a structure fire. They found the upper floors to be engulfed by flames, and their investigators determined arson was involved. Ricky and Martha Duncan and George Clinton all died as a result of the fire. As of July 2024, the arsonist still hasn't been caught. On March 31, 1999, Tina Blunt was reported missing by her boyfriend. On April 2, 1992, Tina Blunt's vehicle, a maroon 1993 Chevrolet S10 pickup, was located abandoned in the 5400 block of Dunsmuir Road. Her body was discovered 12 days later, on April 14, 1999, in the area of Bear Mountain Boulevard and SR99. On July 12, 1998, at approximately 4 a.m., Aaron Bernard Warren was shot while standing in front of the social club, located at 3470 Cottonwood Road. He later died as a result of his injuries. The suspects are unknown. On December 25, 1995, at approximately 2300 hours, Vernie Johnson entered a residence in the 200 block of Marr Street, stating he had been stabbed. He then collapsed on the floor and died. A puncture wound was located on his neck above his chest. Johnson's cause of death was ruled a homicide by the Kern County's coroner's office. On December 23, 1995, at about 12:45 a.m., officers responded to 2801 Weibel Road for arguing and gunshots heard. Philip Williams was found to the front of the apartment complex suffering from a gunshot wound. Philip Williams had been working as a security guard for the apartment complex. This just shows how dangerous it can be to be a security guard in Bakersfield. On August 12, 1993, Jesse Hernandez was attacked in the parking lot of the Ramkabir Motel at 901 Union Avenue. He was attacked by multiple suspects and stabbed to death. On June 11, 1993, officers responded to the 500 block of Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard for a victim of a shooting. Upon arrival, officers located Watson, who had sustained a gunshot wound and died at the scene. His full name was Michael Watson. He was taken from us way too soon. Otis Taylor, another victim. On Saturday, May 12, 1990, at about 7:20 p.m., Otis Taylor was walking to a store in the 700 block of 8th Street. The suspect shot Otis Taylor from a vacant lot as Otis Taylor ran away. Otis Taylor later died from his injuries. On May 10, 1990, Jessica Martinez, 4 years old at the time, was abducted from her apartment complex in the 5000 block of Terrace. She had been playing with several other children at the time. She was missing for several days and found several days later. She had been assaulted and murdered. On the 1st of the month, on the 16th day of 1990 at about 1:02 p.m., Bakersfield Police Department officers responded to the 2500 block of Emerald Street regarding an assault with a deadly weapon. Officers located Chester Canfield, who was deceased as a result of gunshot wounds. Charles Rountree, 46 years old, admitted to death row in 1995 and December 1993. 19-year-old Diana Contreras was Christmas shopping at Valley Plaza Mall. She'd planned to buy her mother a special necklace, but she never got a chance to give it to her. At some point, Diana was approached by 23-year-old Mary Elizabeth Stroder and 23-year-old Charles Rountree. The young couple kidnapped Diana and drove her to a remote location near Taft, where Rountree shot her to death. The couple was arrested in Kansas a few days later, driving the victim's car. The day of her murder and in the days following, numerous withdrawals were made from Diana's bank accounts. 2 days after the murder, using Diana's money, Rountree and Stroder got married in Las Vegas. They were wearing their wedding rings when they were arrested 4 days later. Rountree admitted his involvement in the murder and said he and his girlfriend targeted Diana because she was petite and didn't seem like she'd be much trouble to rob. Rountree made Diana withdraw money from multiple ATMs before killing her. Rountree struggled to explain why he decided to shoot her to death. Rountree also told detectives that his girlfriend Mary Stroder played no role in the decision to kill Diana. Rountree was convicted of murder and kidnapping and robbery in 1995 and sentenced to death. Stroder was convicted of the same charges and sentenced to life, without the possibility of parole. However, in July 2017, Governor Jerry Brown commuted her sentence and Stroder was granted parole in January 2018. The governor's office said Stroder was in many ways a victim herself as a result of several abusive relationships.